As we've seen these latest curbs to contain the virus, they're more relaxed than the last round of curbs, given that more sectors are open for business. But given that more states are under lockdown, except for Sarawak, and the measures are already being extended to February 4th, what is the daily cost to the economy from these measures?
Thank you. So good morning, Sophie. Thank you for having me. Firstly, I'd like to say that for Malaysia today, the stability and consistency of policies are crucial in controlling COVID-19 and enabling the country to be on its economic recovery path. So that's why we announced a new MCO. It's actually MCO version 2.0. And as what you said just now, Sophie, it is slightly different from what we had earlier, our earlier movement control order. More economies are open. We've learned from the previous MCO on what we need to do this time around. We need to get this right. As you know, get this right means that only then can our economy rebound better in 2021. We have seen the resumption of economic activities globally and domestically in the last few quarters. Malaysia's projection
but with that said, Zafrul, what's the hit potentially to the economy on a daily basis, given the expansion of the MCO 2.0 that we've heard from this week?
Correct. So that's where I'm getting at. Because first of all, I wanted to reiterate what you said, that this time the MCO 2.0 is slightly different from MCO 1.0, where more economy sectors are open, especially the essential services. So as such, if you remember last time, we've announced that the impact per day of the previous MCO was around 2.4 billion ringgit a day, whereas this time round is around 700 million ringgit per day. Right. So we have also, additionally, we have also started to implement the various stimulus packages that are still ongoing, and the recently approved budget 2021 and the recent assistance package, which will help mitigate the impact to the economy.
And that being said, Zafrul, given the likely drag this quarter to the economy, will the government be revising its forecast for GDP this year? Analysts have already revised their forecast slightly lower.
Yeah. For now, the government will continue to maintain its projection. We have considered the third wave for COVID-19 that's happening today. And in fact, we've factored in some of it in the formulation of Budget 2021. If you remember that the third wave started in October, November last year. So the impact of MCO, which I mentioned just now, about 700 million ringgit per day, is expected to definitely have an impact to the economy. We'll be monitoring this, but key sectors, especially export sectors and other sectors supporting export, for example, manufacturing, industrial, and also domestic infrastructure projects are still ongoing. However, as I stated time and time again, the government is committed to support the businesses and people as well, and we will need to deploy, if need be, we will deploy more resources to combat COVID-19 to support the economy.
Zafrul, with that target range for GDP still being maintained at 6.5% to 7.5%, will that be on the lower end or the higher end most likely this year?
Well, again, we are at the first quarter. It's still early days, so we are continue to maintain our forecast. But as you know, our forecast is at risk given what's happening with the MCO. So it will be at the lower band of our forecast.
We're seeing the yield curve in Malaysia now the steepest since early 2017 amid some concerns over growth and fiscal consolidation. Will there be moves to expand the debt ceiling potentially, and will the reducing the budget shortfall to 5.4% be achievable?
Yeah. Okay. If you look at the yield curve, if you look at where the debt levels are today, we are still continue to forecast that our debt level will be below the 60% ceiling that we've set earlier on. And what we've announced recently in terms of stimulus packages for this year, which is, we call it PERMAI, is a fiscal injection of about 15 billion ringgit, where most of the money will be coming from the one budget that has been allocated in the budget 2021. Like I said, it's still early, it's still in January, so there is no revision also in our debt levels. We continue to maintain our forecast that we will be below 60% of our debt ceiling limit that we have set for Malaysia.
Well, it's still early in the year. Malaysia is under a state of emergency for the first time in about 50 years. Are there plans by the government to shore up the economy using emergency powers? If so, what ideas are potentially on the table?
Yeah. Well, let me just remind you, Sophie, that the government priority is always to protect the lives and livelihood of the people. Unfortunately, the Prevention and Control of Infectious Disease Act 1988, which is the act that we used before, called Act 342, has been used to contain the further spread of COVID-19. And we feel that this Act 342 is no longer adequate to contain the worsening pandemic in the country. And you've seen the number, the alarming rise in the infection numbers from double digits in the previous wave to the thousands of cases per day within a matter of weeks. Something drastic had to be done. So as such, it is crucial for the government to be able to move swiftly and without impediments to deploy crucial measures and mobilize the necessary resources, as you mentioned. One example is of course, yesterday and the week before, we've been discussing with the private healthcare on how the government can tap on the private healthcare resources to ensure that we can cope in addressing some of the concerns and challenges that the public healthcare is facing today.
Now, Zafrul, has the pandemic derailed the recovery of 1MDB assets? And what about the status of outstanding 1MDB debt under the current conditions?
Thank you. The 1MDB, we have continued even last year when the pandemic started, right? Just to remind you again, on the asset recovery for Malaysia, Malaysia has recovered around 13.4 billion ringgit in cash and physical assets linked to 1MDB. Of course, the biggest recovery is the US dollar seized assets, and then also the Goldman settlement. I think the Goldman settlement is about 2.5 billion US dollar. This is excluding the government has guarantee of 1.4 billion dollars. So 1MDB debt servicing is already part of the government's projection, also under budget 2021. The next step, regardless of the pandemic COVID-19, is to secure the remaining assets above and beyond what we have achieved today. And the Malaysian government remains committed to undertake a responsible and pragmatic approach in the repatriation process that benefits Malaysia and the people.
Now, Zafrul, Joe Biden is officially in the White House. Remains to be seen if U.S.-China tensions will remain elevated and if the U.S. will re-engage in major trade deals in Asia, especially after the signing of the RCEP last November. What are the potential opportunities for Malaysia, given its ties with the U.S., which is Malaysia's third biggest trading partner?
Yeah. Actually, the U.S., as you rightly said, is a huge trading partner for Malaysia. Third largest. Total trade is actually around close to 130 billion ringgit. Just in the first 3 quarters of 2020. This is around 10% of Malaysia's total trade. As you know, China is also our top trading partners. So we hope that under the Biden administration, the US-China trade tensions will be diffused, and we hope that global trade can function in a more orderly manner under the ambit of WTO. The fact that US has restored ties with WHO and now also it's a signatory to the Paris Agreement are positive points, right? So in terms of that, we feel that the global green energy and investment is going to be positive for Malaysia. The sustainability agenda is a key lesson from pandemic. As I mentioned to you before, Sophie, this is why we have decided for the first time to embrace the new SDG, a few of the SDG goals in the creating of our budget 2021.
Yeah, let's expand on that, Zafrul, because investing in clean energy and the green push is not only something the U.S. is focused on, but other major economies. So in light of this, how is Malaysia adapting to this shift towards that green pivot?
Yeah. So various entities and agencies in Malaysia's public and private sectors have also just begun their efforts to embrace ESG principles, which bodes well for attracting future SRI investments, especially from other countries and in the US and Europe especially. So the fact that, as I mentioned, the fact that US now is again a signatory to the Paris Climate Change Agreement will be a boon for the green and energy investments. Malaysia ourselves, we have made a commitment towards sustainability, beginning with the acceptance of the 23 Agenda and the 17 UN SDGs. So Malaysia capital markets have started this first and has moved towards supporting ESG measures, including that we also plan to issue our first sovereign SDG bond this year. We have done many initiatives related to tax, which encourages investments in this area. And we also, as a government, have continued with the Green Technology Financing Scheme with a fund size of close to 2 billion ringgit guaranteed by the government. So furthermore, the Malaysian government is also actively pursuing for SRI as well as green energy technology financing as well.